My wife's mother called me charity case, so I canceled something in her life that she never saw coming. Andre had grown accustomed to Beverly Jackson's cutting remarks over the years, but that evening she crossed a line he couldn't ignore. Standing in the kitchen he helped pay for, eating food he bought, she looked him dead in the eye and told everyone he was just someone her daughter had taken pity on. The humiliation burned, but something else caught Andre's attention that night. Every secretive phone call, every hidden envelope, every nervous glance when he entered a room unexpectedly. He'd been too focused on keeping peace to notice the patterns before, but now he was paying attention. When he discovered what Beverly had been concealing, he knew it was time for her to pay, and that price would be much steeper than she ever imagined. Before we continue, subscribe to stay updated with every shocking revelation. Hit that like button if you're excited, and comment below, what do you think is the biggest secret yet to be uncovered in the story? Where are you watching from? New York City, Cleveland, Austin, or maybe Jamaica? Let's see what Andre discovers when he starts digging deeper into Beverly's hidden world. The dinner table fell silent when Beverly Jackson's fork clattered against her plate. Andre Williams looked up from his meatloaf, the same recipe he'd been making every Wednesday for the past 6 years, and caught the familiar ice in his mother-in-law's eyes. She was building up to something. After living in this house for so long, paying the rent, covering the groceries, even handling the medical bills for Beverly's late husband, Andre, had learned to read the warning signs. The way she pursed her lips, the deliberate pause before she spoke, the glance toward her daughter, Monica, for support that always seemed to come without question. You know what I was thinking about today? Beverly's voice carried that particular tone that made Andre's stomach tighten. She wasn't really asking. She never was. I was thinking about how some people just get comfortable taking handouts, like it's natural to them. Her eyes locked onto Andre's face, measuring his reaction. Some folks don't even realize when they're being a charity case. Andre's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. The words hung in the air like smoke from a house fire, choking and impossible to ignore. Around the table, Monica's younger brother Kevin shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly very interested in his green beans. Monica herself said nothing, just took another sip of her wine and avoided Andre's gaze entirely. The silence stretched until it became unbearable, filled only with the ticking of the wall clock Andre had bought last Christmas. Beverly, Andre said quietly, setting down his fork with careful precision, I think there might be some confusion about who's helping who in this house. His voice remained steady, professional, the same tone he used when explaining treatment options to worried pet owners at the clinic. I've been covering the rent for this place since we moved in, the utilities, the food we're eating right now. He gestured toward the table laden with groceries from his weekly shopping trip, even the prescription costs for your heart medication after Robert passed. Beverly's laugh was sharp and brittle. Oh, listen to him, getting all defensive. She turned to Monica with a theatrical shake of her head. Honey, you need to explain to your husband how gratitude works. When a family takes someone in, feeds them, gives them a roof over their head, that person should be grateful, not acting like they own the place. The words hit Andre like physical blows, each one calculated for maximum damage. Some people just don't understand when they're being shown charity. Andre felt the familiar burn of humiliation crawling up his neck. But something else happened in that moment. Something shifted in his perception, like adjusting the focus on a camera lens. He'd been so focused on keeping peace in this house, on being the provider and protector Monica seemed to need, that he'd stopped paying attention to the details that didn't fit. Beverly's expensive manicures, despite claiming poverty, the designer purse she thought no one noticed, the way she always seemed to have cash for her weekly salon visits while crying about how tight money was getting. Monica, Andre said, turning to his wife with genuine curiosity in his voice, do you agree with your mother? Do you think I'm a charity case? The question wasn't angry or defensive. It was clinical, seeking information. Monica's face flushed red, and she fumbled with her napkin. I think maybe we should talk about this later, when everyone's calmed down. Her words were careful, diplomatic, but Andre noticed what she didn't say. She didn't defend him. She didn't correct her mother's characterization. She just wanted the conversation to stop. Kevin cleared his throat. Maybe I should head out early tonight. Got work in the morning. He was already pushing back from the table, eager to escape the tension that had settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Beverly waved him away dismissively. Go ahead, baby. Some of us need to have adult conversations about responsibility and respect. The emphasis on the last word was unmistakable, directed squarely at Andre. As Kevin gathered his jacket and headed for the door, Andre found himself studying Beverly's face with new attention. There was something calculating in her expression, something that went beyond simple dislike or family tension. She looked satisfied, like someone who just won a chess match. But what game were they playing? Andre had always assumed her hostility came from protective maternal instincts, but now he wasn't so sure. There was purpose in her cruelty, strategy behind her timing. The front door closed behind Kevin with a soft click, and Beverly stood up from the table with sudden energy. "Well, I've got some calls to make before it gets too late." She moved toward the living room with quick, purposeful steps. Andre began clearing the dishes, a routine that had become second nature over the years. Monica helped in silence, their movements coordinated but distant. When they finished, she mumbled something about taking a bath and disappeared upstairs, leaving Andre alone with the lingering echo of Beverly's words and a growing sense that something fundamental had changed in this house. Walking toward the living room to turn off the lamps, Andre paused at the archway. Beverly sat hunched over a thick manila envelope, speaking in hushed tones into her cell phone. When she heard his footsteps, she moved with startling speed, shoving the envelope under a couch cushion and ending her call with an abrupt goodbye. Her face transformed from guilty panic to forced casualness in the span of a heartbeat, but it was too late. Andre had seen the thick stack of papers, caught the nervous tremor in her voice as she said goodbye to whoever was on the other end. Beverly Jackson was hiding something significant, and Andre was finally ready to find out what it was. The next morning brought an unusual quiet to the house. Monica had left early for her marketing job downtown, mumbling something about client meetings and avoiding eye contact with Andre entirely. Beverly emerged from her bedroom later than usual, moving through the kitchen with the careful deliberation of someone nursing both a hangover and wounded pride. Andre prepared his coffee and toast with the same methodical routine he'd maintained for years, but now every sound seemed amplified. The whistle of the kettle, the scrape of Beverly's chair against the linoleum, the rustle of papers she thought he couldn't hear. Andre had always prided himself on being observant. In his work as a veterinary doctor, missing small details could mean the difference between saving an animal's life and losing it forever. A slight change in breathing patterns, an unusual posture, a barely perceptible shift in behavior. These were the clues that led to accurate diagnoses. Now, as he watched Beverly from his peripheral vision, he began applying the same careful attention to her daily routines. She checked her phone constantly, but always angled it away from view. When the mailman arrived, she intercepted the delivery before Andre could see what had been delivered. Most telling of all, she'd started closing doors that had always remained open before. The pattern became clearer over the following days. Beverly received mail almost daily, thick envelopes with official-looking return addresses that she immediately spirited away to her bedroom. Andre caught glimpses of logos he recognized. Major insurance companies, government agencies, financial institutions. When he'd mentioned the frequency of her mail delivery in passing, Beverly had laughed it off as junk mail and medical bills. But her explanation didn't match what Andre was seeing. Medical bills didn't arrive in manila envelopes with multiple pages of documentation. Junk mail wasn't handled with the careful secrecy Beverly employed. More concerning was the discrepancy between Beverly's claimed financial situation and her actual spending habits. She complained constantly about being broke and struggling to make ends meet, especially when Andre was around to hear it. But on Tuesday afternoon, when she thought he was at work, Andre returned home early to grab some files he'd forgotten and witnessed something that didn't align with her poverty narrative. Beverly was in the driveway, counting out cash to pay for grocery delivery, not food stamps or a credit card, but crisp bills from a thick roll she quickly concealed when she noticed Andre's truck pulling up. "Thought you were working late today," Beverly said, her voice carrying a note of accusation rather than surprise. Andre nodded toward the house. "Forgot some client files. Long day ahead." He watched her face carefully, noting the way her eyes darted toward the grocery bags and back to his face. "That's a lot of food. Special occasion?" Beverly's laugh sounded forced. "Oh, you know how it is. Had to stock up while things were on sale. Every penny counts when you're living on a fixed income." But Andre had seen the receipt slip from one of the bags, and the total didn't suggest someone carefully watching every dollar. Organic vegetables, premium cuts of meat, imported cheeses. the kind of groceries Andre himself bought when money wasn't a concern. Either Beverly was lying about her financial struggles, or she had access to money she wasn't admitting to. Both possibilities troubled him more than he wanted to acknowledge. That evening, Andre found himself paying closer attention to the sounds coming from Beverly's bedroom. The walls in the old house were thin, and he could hear the shuffle of papers, the soft thud of file drawers opening and closing, and occasional phone conversations conducted in whispers too low to understand. When Monica returned from work, she went straight to her mother's room for what had become their nightly conference. Andre could hear their voices, but not their words, just the rhythm of serious conversation punctuated by long pauses. Friday afternoon brought the breakthrough Andre hadn't been consciously seeking. He'd taken a half day at the clinic to handle some personal errands and returned home to find Beverly's bedroom door ajar. Unusual for someone who had become increasingly secretive about her private space. Through the gap, he could see Beverly at her dresser, organizing what appeared to be a substantial collection of file folders. Each folder was thick with documents, and she handled them with the care of someone managing important paperwork rather than random correspondence. Andre moved closer, positioning himself where he could observe without being seen. Beverly had spread several folders across her bed, each labeled with different information. From his limited vantage point, Andre could see that the files were organized systematically, going back several years. Some contained what looked like government forms, others held insurance documents, and a few appeared to contain photographs and identification materials. Whatever Beverly was managing, it was extensive, organized, and definitely not medical bills or junk mail. The sound of Monica's car in the driveway sent Beverly into immediate action. She gathered the folders with practiced efficiency, securing them in what Andre now realized was a locked file cabinet hidden behind her hanging clothes. By the time Monica entered the house, Beverly was in the kitchen preparing dinner as if nothing unusual had happened. But Andre had seen enough to know that Beverly Jackson was managing some kind of elaborate filing system, and she was going to great lengths to keep it hidden. That night, as Andre lay in bed listening to Monica's steady breathing beside him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was living with strangers. Tomorrow he would start asking more pointed questions. But first, he needed to examine one of those envelopes more closely. The next morning, while Beverly was in the shower, Andre intercepted the mail delivery. His hands trembled slightly as he examined the return address on a thick manila envelope. The name printed clearly across the top made his blood run cold. Beverly Martinez. The envelope felt heavier than it should have as Andre held it up to the morning light streaming through the kitchen window. Beverly Martinez. The name stared back at him from the official letterhead of Metropolitan Life Insurance, printed in bold black letters that seemed to mock everything Andre thought he knew about his mother-in-law. He'd lived in this house for 6 years, paid bills addressed to Beverly Jackson, signed in lease agreements with Beverly Jackson as a co-tenant, even helped her fill out medical forms using the name Beverly Jackson. So who exactly was Beverly Martinez, and why was she receiving insurance correspondence at their address? Andre's hands moved with surgical precision as he photographed the envelope from multiple angles before carefully steaming it open over the kitchen kettle. The contents made his stomach drop. It was a benefit statement showing monthly payments of $850 deposited into an account under the name Beverly Martinez for unemployment compensation. The dates covered the past 18 months, the entire period during which Beverly had been claiming poverty and accepting Andre's financial support while supposedly living on a modest widow's pension. The sound of Beverly's bedroom door opening sent Andre into immediate action. He quickly sealed the envelope and placed it back with the other mail, his heart pounding as Beverly shuffled into the kitchen wearing her worn terry cloth robe and yesterday's irritation. "Coffee ready yet?" she asked without looking at him, already reaching for her favorite mug, the one Andre had bought her last Mother's Day in an attempt to improve their relationship. "Just finished brewing," Andre replied, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. He handed Beverly her mail as casually as possible, watching her face for any reaction when she saw the insurance envelope. Her expression remained neutral, but Andre noticed the slight quickening of her movements as she shuffled through the stack. "Mostly junk today. Bills and advertisements." Beverly's tone was dismissive, but she clutched the mail protectively against her chest. "Actually," Andre said, testing the waters carefully, "I couldn't help but notice you've been getting a lot of mail from insurance companies lately. Everything okay with your coverage?" Beverly's eyes narrowed slightly. Everything's fine, just routine paperwork. You know how insurance companies are, always sending updates and policy information? She moved toward her bedroom with obvious intent to end the conversation, but Andre pressed forward. Beverly Martinez, Andre said quietly, watching her freeze mid-step. That's an interesting name. Is that someone you know? The silence that followed was deafening. Beverly turned slowly, her face cycling through several emotions before settling on defensive anger. I don't know what you're talking about. You must have misread something. But her voice carried the tremor of someone caught in a lie. Andre spent the rest of the day at the veterinary clinic, but his mind kept returning to the envelope and Beverly's reaction. During his lunch break, he conducted a simple internet search for Beverly Martinez in their city. The results were limited but illuminating. There were records of a Beverly Martinez receiving unemployment benefits, listings for a Beverly Martinez in local government assistance databases, and most troubling of all, a Beverly Martinez who had filed insurance claims for a deceased spouse, claims that seemed to overlap with Beverly Jackson's timeline perfectly. That evening, Andre decided to test his growing suspicions more directly. Monica, he said as they sat in their bedroom after dinner, has your mother ever mentioned having financial problems? I mean, beyond the normal concerns about living on a fixed income? Monica looked up from her phone with obvious irritation. Why are you asking about my mother's finances? That's really none of your business. The defensive response surprised Andre with its intensity. It becomes my business when I'm supporting this entire household, he replied calmly. I just want to make sure she's getting all the benefits she's entitled to. Social Security, widow's benefits, that sort of thing. Monica's jaw tightened. My mother is handling her own affairs just fine. She doesn't need you poking around in her personal business. Personal business, Andre repeated thoughtfully. Like using multiple names on official documents? The question hit its target. Monica's face flushed red, and she stood up abruptly. I don't know what you think you've discovered, but you need to stop this investigation nonsense. My mother has been through enough without you adding paranoia to her stress. Andre studied his wife's face carefully. Monica knew something. Her defensiveness wasn't just protective, it was specific, targeted, like someone defending a particular secret rather than general privacy. I'm not trying to cause stress, Andre said. I'm trying to understand why someone who claims to be struggling financially seems to have access to resources that don't match her story. Resources? Monica laughed, but the sound was brittle and forced. What resources? My mother lives in our house because she can't afford her own place. She depends on us for everything. If you're looking for some conspiracy, you are going to be disappointed. But even as she spoke, Monica was moving toward the bedroom door, clearly eager to escape the conversation. After Monica left to take a shower, Andre sat alone in their bedroom processing what he'd learned. Beverly was receiving money under a false identity. Monica knew enough about her mother's situation to become defensive when questioned. And somewhere in Beverly's locked file cabinet were documents that would explain exactly what was happening in this house. Andre had always believed in direct communication and honest relationships, but he was beginning to realize that the people he lived with had been lying to him for months, possibly years. The next morning brought another envelope addressed to Beverly Martinez, this time from the state unemployment office. Andre photographed it before Beverly could intercept the mail, and this time he noticed something that made his blood run cold. The return address wasn't just for unemployment benefits. It was specifically for fraudulent claims investigation. Someone named Beverly Martinez was under official scrutiny, and that someone was living in Andre's house, eating food he bought, and sleeping in a bed he helped pay for. But the most chilling realization came when Andre spotted a second envelope mixed in with the regular mail, this one addressed to Robert Martinez, Beverly's husband, who had supposedly died 3 years ago. Andre stared at the envelope addressed to Robert Martinez until the letters seemed to blur together. Robert Martinez, Beverly's husband, who had supposedly died 3 years ago, was still receiving official government correspondence at their address. Andre's hands trembled slightly as he photographed the envelope from every angle, his mind racing through the implications. Dead people don't receive mail about benefit renewals. Dead people don't have active unemployment claims. Dead people don't continue to exist in government databases unless someone is deliberately keeping them alive on paper. The sound of Beverly's shower running upstairs gave Andre the opportunity he'd been waiting for. He moved quickly to her bedroom, his heart hammering as he approached the locked file cabinet he'd observed days earlier. The lock was simple, the kind designed more for privacy than security, and Andre's veterinary training had given him steady hands and problem-solving skills that served him well now. Within minutes, he had the cabinet open and was staring at the most organized fraud operation he could have imagined. The files were meticulously arranged by identity and date. Beverly Jackson occupied one section: legitimate documents showing her real social security number, birth certificate, and marriage license to Robert Jackson, who had indeed died 3 years earlier. But Beverly Martinez filled another entire section, complete with a different social security number, falsified employment history, and marriage certificate to Robert Martinez, who was supposedly still alive, according to unemployment records. Most shocking of all was a third identity: Beverly Rodriguez, with yet another complete set of documentation and benefit claims dating back over 15 years. Andre photographed everything with mechanical precision, his disbelief growing with each document. Beverly had been running multiple identities simultaneously, collecting unemployment benefits under one name while receiving widow's benefits under another, claiming disability payments as a third person while living rent-free in Andre's house. The total monthly income from her various fraudulent claims all exceeded $3,000, more than Andre made at the veterinary clinic some months. But the revelation that stopped Andre cold came when he opened Monica's jewelry box on Beverly's dresser, looking for additional hidden documents. Instead, he found purchase receipts that made his stomach drop. Monica's diamond earrings, which she'd claimed were a bonus reward from her marketing job, had been purchased with cash 3 months earlier. The same month, Beverly had received a large insurance settlement under the name Beverly Rodriguez. Monica's new car, which she'd explained as an employee lease deal, had actually been bought outright with a cashier's check traced to an account belonging to Robert Martinez. Andre sat heavily on Beverly's bed, surrounded by evidence of the most elaborate deception he'd ever encountered. Monica wasn't just aware of her mother's fraud, she was an active beneficiary. Every gift she'd received, every luxury she'd enjoyed, every financial advantage she'd claimed came from stolen money. The woman Andre had married and supported for 6 years had been living off the proceeds of systematic theft while watching him struggle to pay their household expenses. The shower stopped running upstairs, and Andre quickly returned the files to their original positions and relocked the cabinet. He made it back to the kitchen just as Beverly appeared, her hair wrapped in a towel and her demeanor unusually cheerful. "Good morning," she said brightly, as if yesterday's tension had never happened. "Coffee smells wonderful." Andre handed her a mug, studying her face with new understanding. This woman wasn't just a bitter mother-in-law with boundary issues. She was a calculating criminal who had been playing a long game for over 15 years. "Beverly," Andre said carefully, "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, about finances and responsibility." Beverly's smile tightened slightly. "Oh, that, I hope you understand. I was just trying to make sure everyone in this family is pulling their weight appropriately." Andre nodded thoughtfully. "Of course, speaking of which, I'm curious about something. How exactly does someone transition from one identity to another?" Hypothetically speaking, Beverly's coffee mug paused halfway to her lips. "That's an odd question. Why would someone need to do that?" Her voice remained casual, but Andre could see the calculation in her eyes. "Well," Andre continued, "I was reading about people who get remarried and take new names, or people who move to new states and update their documentation. It seems like it would be complicated to manage multiple sets of records." "I wouldn't know," Beverly replied quickly. "I've always been Beverly Jackson. Same name, same person, same life." But as she spoke, Andre noticed her glance toward her bedroom door, a telltale sign that someone was protecting something hidden nearby. "Although," she added with false casualness, "I suppose some people might have reasons for wanting fresh starts. New opportunities that weren't available under their old circumstances." The front door opened, and Monica called out that she was home early from work. Andre watched Beverly's face light up with genuine relief at the interruption. "Perfect timing," Beverly said loudly. "Andre and I were just having an interesting conversation about new opportunities." Monica entered the kitchen looking tired and stressed, carrying her designer purse that Andre now knew had been purchased with stolen money. "What kind of opportunities?" Monica asked, kissing her mother's cheek while avoiding eye contact with Andre. Beverly smiled mysteriously. "Oh, just discussing how sometimes people need to be creative about improving their financial situations, especially when they have family members who might not understand the complexities of modern economic survival." Andre felt something fundamental shift in his understanding of his position in this household. He wasn't a provider being taken for granted. He was a mark being systematically deceived. Monica and Beverly weren't just ungrateful family members. They were partners in an ongoing criminal enterprise that had been funding their lifestyle while he worked overtime to make ends meet. The charity case Beverly had accused him of being was actually her and Monica, except their charity came from stolen government benefits rather than honest employment. That evening, Andre excused himself early and went to his home office to process what he'd discovered. As he uploaded the photographs to a secure cloud account, he could hear Beverly on the phone in her bedroom, speaking in the hushed tones that had become familiar over recent days. But now Andre understood enough to pay closer attention to her words, and what he heard made his blood run cold. "No, the timing is perfect," Beverly was saying. "The family just moved in last month, so they're still getting settled. Young couple, probably struggling with the mortgage payments. They'll be grateful for any assistance program that can help them get established." Andre moved closer to the wall, straining to hear more clearly. "I've already confirmed their information through the neighborhood directory. Both working, no previous insurance claims, perfect candidates for what we discussed." Andre realized with horror that he was listening to Beverly plan her next victim. Someone else was about to be targeted by whatever scheme she was running, and Andre was the only person who knew enough to stop it. Andre spent the next 3 days in a state of controlled vigilance, balancing his normal routine with the careful documentation of Beverly's criminal activities. He installed a voice recording app on his phone and began capturing her conversations whenever possible, building a comprehensive record of her fraud operations. What he discovered exceeded even his worst suspicions. Beverly wasn't working alone. She was part of a network that included at least 2 other people who helped her establish false identities and target vulnerable families. The recordings revealed a sophisticated operation. Beverly would identify recently relocated families through real estate records and neighborhood directories, then approach them under the guise of offering assistance with insurance claims or government benefit applications. Once she gained their trust and personal information, she would use their identities to establish fraudulent accounts, while simultaneously helping them apply for legitimate benefits that would be redirected to addresses she controlled. The families would receive some assistance, enough to keep them grateful and unquestioning, while Beverly captured the majority of the benefits for herself. Tuesday morning brought the confrontation Andre had been expecting. He was preparing breakfast when Beverly emerged from her bedroom with an expression he'd never seen before. Cold, calculating, and completely devoid of the theatrical dramatics that usually characterize her hostility toward him. "We need to talk," she said without preamble, settling into her chair at the kitchen table with the authority of someone calling a board meeting. "About what?" Andre asked, though he already knew the conversation would center on his recent behavior. He'd been too curious, asked too many pointed questions, shown too much interest in Beverly's personal business. Beverly studied his face with the intensity of a prosecutor examining a hostile witness. "About boundaries, about respect, about understanding your place in this family." Her voice carried a threat that hadn't been there during their previous arguments. Andre set down his coffee mug and gave Beverly his full attention. "I'm listening." Beverly leaned forward, her eyes never leaving his face. "I know you've been going through my mail. I know you've been asking Monica questions about my finances. I know you think you've discovered something that gives you some kind of leverage in this house." Each accusation was delivered with precise emphasis, designed to intimidate and establish dominance. "I don't know what you mean," Andre replied calmly. "I've been concerned about your well-being, especially given how often you mention struggling financially while I'm covering most of our household expenses." Beverly's laugh was sharp and humorless. "Don't play games with me. You're not smart enough to outwit someone who's been handling complex situations since before you were born." The insult hung in the air between them, but Andre recognized it for what it was, a deflection technique designed to make him defensive rather than inquisitive. "Complex situations," he repeated thoughtfully. "That's an interesting way to describe whatever you've been managing with all those files and phone calls." Beverly's expression darkened. "You have no idea what you're messing with. No idea what kind of consequences come from sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Monica chose that moment to enter the kitchen, and Andre could see immediately that this confrontation had been planned. Her face carried the same cold determination as her mother's, and she positioned herself strategically between Andre and the exit. "Good morning," Monica said without warmth. "I understand you and Mom need to clear the air about some things." Andre looked between the two women and realized he was facing a coordinated intervention. It sounds like you've already discussed whatever concerns you have, he said. Maybe you could share them with me directly instead of talking around the subject. Beverly stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor with deliberate noise. Fine. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop snooping there for my personal belongings. You're going to stop asking questions about my financial arrangements. And you're going to start showing some gratitude for everything this family has done for you. Everything this family has done for me, Andre repeated slowly. You mean like allowing me to pay rent on a house where I'm treated like an unwelcome guest? Like letting me buy groceries for people who call me a charity case? Like giving me the privilege of covering medical bills for someone who insults me at every opportunity? His voice remained calm, but the words carried an edge that hadn't been there in previous arguments. Monica stepped forward with obvious anger. You need to check your attitude. My mother opened her home to us when we needed a place to live. She's been nothing but generous, and all you've done is complain and cause problems. Andre studied his wife's face, seeing clearly for the first time how completely she'd aligned herself with her mother's version of reality. Generous, he bet. That's one word for it. Beverly moved closer to Andre, invading his personal space with deliberate aggression. Here's what's really going to happen. You're going to pack your things and find somewhere else to live. Today, this house belongs to my family, and you're no longer welcome here. The words hit Andre like a physical blow, not because they surprised him, but because they confirmed what he'd already begun to suspect. Beverly knew he'd discovered too much, and she was moving to eliminate the threat he represented. Monica nodded in agreement. I think that's for the best. We need some space to work on our family relationships without outside interference. Andre looked at his wife of 6 years, the woman he had supported and protected and loved, and saw a stranger who was willing to sacrifice their marriage to protect her mother's criminal activities. Outside interference, he repeated. Is that what you call someone asking questions about obvious lies? Pack your things, Beverly said firmly. I want you out of this house by tonight. And Andre, if you're thinking about causing problems for this family, you should remember that you don't have any proof of whatever conspiracy theories you've been developing. It would be very unfortunate if you tried to spread rumors that you couldn't support with evidence. Andre nodded slowly, recognizing the threat for what it was. Beverly was confident that her filing system was secure, that her false identities were protected, and that Andre was just a suspicious husband without real evidence of wrongdoing. She had no idea that Andre had photographed everything, recorded her conversations, and documented her entire operation. I understand, Andre said quietly. I'll start packing immediately. As Andre left the kitchen, he heard Beverly and Monica beginning what sounded like a celebration. They thought they'd won, thought they'd successfully intimidated him into backing down and moving away quietly. What they didn't know was that Andre had already contacted a lawyer, uploaded his evidence to secure servers, and begun the process of reporting Beverly's fraud to the appropriate authorities. Tonight, he would pack his belongings and leave their house. Tomorrow, he would begin destroying their criminal empire. Andre's phone rang as he reached his bedroom, the caller ID showing a number he didn't recognize. When he answered, a woman's voice asked hesitantly, Is this Andre Williams? I got your number from someone who said you might be able to help me with a problem involving Beverly Jackson. The woman's name was Carol Rivera, and she agreed to meet Andre at a coffee shop downtown within 2 hours of their initial phone conversation. Andre arrived early, choosing a corner table where they could speak privately, his mind racing with questions about how this stranger had gotten his contact information and what kind of help she thought he could provide. When Carol walked through the door, Andre immediately recognized the look of someone carrying a heavy burden, the same expression he had been seeing in his own mirror for weeks. Carol was in her mid-60s, impeccably dressed despite an underlying weariness that spoke of months of stress and worry. She approached Andre's table with the cautious movements of someone who'd learned not to trust easily, clutching a worn leather portfolio against her chest like armor. Mr. Williams, she asked softly, thank you for agreeing to meet with me. I wasn't sure if you'd believe me or think I was crazy. Please sit down, Andre said, studying Carol's face and seeing genuine distress rather than deception. How did you get my number, and what does this have to do with Beverly Jackson? Carol settled into the chair across from him and opened her portfolio with trembling hands. I got your number from my neighbor's son, who works at the veterinary clinic where you're employed. He mentioned that you'd been asking questions about insurance fraud, and when I heard the name Beverly Jackson, I knew I had to contact you immediately. Carol spread several documents across the small table, creating a timeline that made Andre's stomach drop. Bank statements showing regular withdrawals totaling over $20,000. Insurance forms bearing Beverly's forged signature. Photographs of Beverly meeting with Carol under the assumed identity of a licensed insurance representative. Most damning of all, copies of official correspondence that Beverly had used to convince Carol that her late husband's life insurance policy required additional processing fees to release the full benefit amount. She told me the insurance company had flagged my claim for review because of new federal regulations, Carol explained, her voice growing stronger as she shared her story. She said I needed to pay processing fees up front, but that I'd receive the full policy amount plus interest once the review was completed. She had official letterhead, government identification, even references from other families she'd supposedly helped. Andre examined the forged documents with growing horror, recognizing Beverly's methodical approach to establishing credibility with her victims. How long did this go on? Andre asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Carol's face crumpled slightly. 18 months. Every time I thought the process was finished, there would be another fee, another form, another delay. She was so convincing, so professional. She knew details about my husband's policy that only someone with access to official records could know. Andre realized that Beverly's fraud operation was far more extensive than even his worst suspicions had suggested. Carol opened another section of her portfolio, revealing contact information for 6 other families who had been victimized by Beverly using variations of the same insurance scam. Mrs. Patterson lost $15,000. The Hendersons lost $12,000. The Washingtons lost nearly $30,000 because they fell for her investment opportunity scam as well. Carol's voice grew bitter. All of us are widows or recently divorced women. All of us were struggling with complex insurance claims. All of us trusted her because she seemed to understand exactly what we were going through. Andre did quick calculations in his head and realized Beverly had stolen at least $200,000 from vulnerable families over the past few years. The money she'd been spending on luxury groceries and designer accessories wasn't just from government benefit fraud. It was from systematically targeting grieving families during their most vulnerable moments. Have any of you reported this to the police? Andre asked, though Carol's expression already provided the answer. We tried, Carol said sadly. But Beverly is very careful about how she structures these scams. She always provides some legitimate assistance alongside the fraud, so victims receive partial benefits that make her claims seem credible. When we tried to file complaints, the authorities told us it looked like civil disputes rather than criminal fraud. Carol leaned forward with sudden intensity. But if someone with inside knowledge of her operation came forward with evidence, that would change everything. Andre spent the next hour sharing his own discoveries with Carol, showing her the photographs he'd taken of Beverly's filing system and playing selected recordings of her phone conversations. Carol's face grew pale as she realized the scope of Beverly's criminal activities. She's not just targeting insurance claims, Carol said. She's running multiple identity theft operations simultaneously. This woman is a professional criminal. The question is what we do about it, Andre said. I've been planning to file a police report, but I wasn't sure if I had enough evidence to make charges stick. Carol smiled for the first time since they'd met. Mr. Williams, between your documentation of her false identities and my records of her victim targeting, we have enough evidence to put Beverly Jackson in prison for a very long time. But we need to move quickly before she realizes how much you know. Andre felt a weight lifting from his shoulders that he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. For weeks, he'd been operating in isolation, questioning his own perceptions and wondering if he was overreacting to circumstantial evidence. Now he had confirmation that Beverly was exactly as dangerous as he'd suspected, and he had an ally who understood the stakes. What do you suggest we do? Andre asked. Carol pulled out her cell phone and scrolled through her contacts. I have a friend who works for the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. She's been waiting for enough evidence to open a formal investigation into organized insurance fraud in this area. I think it's time to make that call. Andre nodded, feeling a sense of purpose that had been missing since this nightmare began. Beverly had made a critical mistake when she underestimated both Andre's intelligence and her victim's determination to seek justice. As Andre drove home to collect his belongings, his phone buzzed with a text message from Monica. Don't bother coming back tonight. Your stuff is already packed and waiting on the front porch. We've changed the locks." Andre smiled grimly as he read the message. Beverly and Monica thought they were eliminating a problem by forcing him out of the house. What they'd actually done was remove the last obstacle preventing him from pursuing criminal charges without worrying about family loyalty or household dynamics. Andre pulled into the driveway of the house he'd called home for 6 years and saw 3 large suitcases sitting beside the front door like discarded trash. Beverly and Monica were watching from the living room window, their faces showing satisfaction at what they believed was their victory. Andre loaded his belongings into his truck while they watched, but he wasn't feeling defeated or humiliated. He was feeling liberated, and tomorrow morning, Beverly Jackson's criminal empire would begin crumbling around her. Andre returned to the house at exactly 9 o'clock the next morning, not to retrieve forgotten belongings or attempt reconciliation, but to witness the conclusion of Beverly Jackson's criminal career. He parked across the street and walked calmly to the front door, carrying a folder containing copies of every document he'd photographed, every recording he'd made, and every piece of evidence Carol Rivera had provided. Beverly and Monica were waiting for him in the living room, their faces showing the smug satisfaction of people who believed they'd successfully eliminated a threat. "I thought we made it clear that you weren't welcome here anymore," Beverly said without rising from her chair. She was dressed more formally than usual, wearing the kind of outfit someone might choose for an important business meeting. Andre noticed that Monica was similarly dressed, and he realized they were probably planning to meet with their next victims, the young family Beverly had been discussing during her recorded phone conversation. "You did make that clear," Andre replied calmly, settling into the chair he'd occupied during thousands of family dinners over the past 6 years. "But I wanted to have one final conversation before we go our separate ways permanently." Beverly's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but Monica looked merely irritated by what she obviously considered Andre's inability to accept rejection gracefully. "There's nothing left to discuss," Monica said firmly. "You've been asked to leave, and continuing to show up uninvited is harassment." Andre opened his folder and spread several photographs across the coffee table, images showing Beverly's multiple identities, fraudulent insurance claims, and systematic theft from vulnerable families. The room fell silent as Beverly and Monica stared at the evidence of crimes they believed were perfectly concealed. Beverly recovered first, her face shifting from shock to cold calculation. "I don't know where you got those pictures or what you think they prove, but taking photographs of someone's personal documents without permission is probably illegal." Her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to deflecting accusations through intimidation and misdirection. "You could be charged with invasion of privacy." Andre smiled. "That's an interesting legal theory. I'm curious about your expertise in criminal law, considering you've been running a multi-identity fraud operation for over 15 years. Beverly's mask finally slipped, revealing the calculating criminal beneath the facade of bitter mother-in-law. "So what if I have? You think some veterinarian is going to outsmart someone who's been working the system since before you graduated high school?" Monica gasped, but Beverly continued with growing confidence. "You want to know the truth? I've been taking money from insurance companies and government programs that have more than they know what to do with. I've been helping families get benefits they deserve but can't navigate the bureaucracy to obtain. And yes, I've been keeping a percentage for my services. It's called being entrepreneurial." Andre was recording the conversation on his phone, capturing Beverly's confession in her own words. "Entrepreneurial," he repeated. "That's one way to describe identity theft, insurance fraud, and systematic theft from grieving families." Beverly laughed harshly. "Grieving families who got exactly what I promised them. Help with their insurance claims and government benefits. The fact that I also help myself to some additional compensation is just good business." "Good business," Andre said thoughtfully. "Like helping yourself to over $200,000 from families who trusted you during the worst periods of their lives." Beverly's confidence faltered slightly at the specific figure, but she quickly recovered. "You can't prove any of that. You have some pictures of documents you shouldn't have been looking at, and some recordings you made illegally. No prosecutor would touch this case." Andre checked his watch. "Actually, the FBI seems very interested in this case, especially when it's presented alongside testimonies from 6 families you've defrauded, bank records showing your fraudulent transactions, and documentation of your multiple false identities." Beverly's face went pale, but she maintained her defiant posture. "You're bluffing. You don't have the intelligence or resources to build that kind of case." The sound of car doors slamming outside made everyone turn toward the windows. Andre stood up calmly as federal agents and local police officers approached the house, their movements coordinated and purposeful. Actually, I had help. Carol Rivera sends her regards, by the way. She's very grateful that someone finally took her concerns about organized insurance fraud seriously. Beverly jumped to her feet, panic replacing confidence for the first time since Andre had known her. You can't do this. You're destroying an entire family over some misunderstanding about paperwork. Andre shook his head. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply ensuring that the families you've stolen from get justice and that you face consequences for your choices. The front door opened without ceremony as federal agents entered the house with a search warrant. Beverly Jackson, also known as Beverly Martinez and Beverly Rodriguez, the lead agent announced, you're under arrest for federal charges of identity theft, insurance fraud, and organized financial crimes. Beverly's face crumpled as the handcuffs clicked into place. Her facade of control finally shattered completely. Monica stood frozen in the center of the living room as agents began seizing financial records and electronic devices. This is insane, she said to no one in particular. This is just a misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion. Andre looked at his wife with something approaching pity. Monica, your car was purchased with stolen money. Your jewelry was bought with funds taken from families who lost their spouses. Your entire lifestyle for the past several years has been funded by your mother's criminal activities. I didn't know, Monica said desperately, but her voice lacked conviction even as she spoke the words. Andre had documented her participation too thoroughly for denial to be credible. The agents were already reviewing bank records, showing Monica's direct access to accounts connected to Beverly's fraudulent identities. I thought she was just good with paperwork and benefits applications. Andre felt no satisfaction watching Monica's world collapse around her, only a deep sadness for the years he'd wasted loving someone who had been lying to him every single day. The house is going into federal forfeiture because it was purchased with proceeds from fraud, Andre explained gently. Your car will be repossessed. The jewelry and other assets purchased with stolen money will be returned to the families your mother defrauded. As Beverly was led toward the police car, she turned back to look at Andre with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. You planned this from the beginning, didn't you? She asked. You were never the pathetic charity case I thought you were. Andre met her gaze steadily. No, Beverly. I was exactly who I appeared to be. Someone who believes in honesty, integrity, and taking care of the people I love. You mistook those qualities for weakness, and that mistake cost you everything. Andre watched the police cars disappear down the street, carrying Beverly toward a federal courthouse, where she would face charges carrying a potential sentence of 15 years in prison. Monica sat on the front steps of the house that would soon no longer belong to her, crying for a life built on lies that had finally caught up with her. Andre felt no triumph, only relief that the truth had finally been exposed and justice would be served. 3 months after Beverly's arrest, Andre sat in the gallery of the federal courthouse, watching his former mother-in-law receive a sentence of 12 years in federal prison. The judge had been thorough in outlining Beverly's crimes: systematic identity theft, insurance fraud totaling over $180,000, and conspiracy to defraud federal benefit programs. Beverly would also be required to pay full restitution to her victims, though the chances of recovering the stolen money were slim, given that most of it had already been spent on luxury items and lifestyle expenses. Monica had filed for divorce 2 weeks after her mother's arrest, citing irreconcilable differences rather than acknowledging her role in Beverly's criminal enterprise. The divorce proceedings were swift and uncomplicated since all assets purchased with fraudulent funds were subject to federal forfeiture. Monica received nothing from their marriage except the debt from credit cards she'd used to maintain her lifestyle after the fraud money was frozen. Andre felt no vindication watching his ex-wife struggle with the consequences of choices she'd made, only sadness for the years they'd both lost. The families Beverly had victimized reached out to Andre in the weeks following her conviction. Carol Rivera had organized a support group for fraud victims, and Andre found himself welcomed into a community of people who understood the unique betrayal of being deceived by someone they trusted. Mrs. Patterson brought homemade cookies to every meeting. The Hendersons invited Andre to their grandson's birthday party. The Washingtons recommended him to friends who needed veterinary services for their pets. Andre used his savings to open his own veterinary clinic in a converted storefront downtown. The space was smaller than his previous workplace, but it belonged to him completely. He specialized in affordable care for families who couldn't afford expensive treatments, remembering how financial stress had made him vulnerable to Beverly's manipulation. The clinic thrived because Andre genuinely cared about helping people during difficult times, and his reputation for honest dealing brought him steady referrals. Carol Rivera became more than a fellow fraud victim. She became a friend and mentor who helped Andre process the emotional aftermath of his failed marriage. She had survived her own betrayal with grace and wisdom, and she taught Andre that healing meant choosing self-respect over the false peace of avoiding conflict. They met for coffee every Tuesday morning, sharing stories about rebuilding their lives and protecting themselves from future deception. Andre learned to recognize the difference between being generous and being taken advantage of. He'd spent years confusing love with financial support, thinking that providing for ungrateful people would eventually earn their respect and affection. Now he understood that genuine relationships were built on mutual care and honesty, not one-sided sacrifice and silent resentment. He would never again stay silent when someone treated him poorly just to maintain superficial harmony. 6 months after opening his clinic, Andre met Dr. Sarah, a newly licensed veterinarian looking for office space to start her own practice. She was intelligent, ambitious, and refreshingly direct about her expectations and boundaries. When Andre offered to share his clinic space, Sarah insisted on paying market-rate rent and contributing equally to overhead expenses. Their professional partnership gradually developed into friendship and eventually into something deeper, based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. Andre occasionally received updates about Monica through mutual acquaintances. She'd moved back in with her brother Kevin and was working 2 jobs to pay off the debts she'd accumulated during her marriage. She'd never apologized for her role in Beverly's crimes or acknowledged how her silence had enabled years of deception. Andre felt no anger toward his ex-wife anymore, only gratitude that he'd discovered the truth before wasting more years in a relationship built on lies. 1 year after Beverly's sentencing, Andre stood in his thriving veterinary clinic, surrounded by friends who valued his integrity and respected his boundaries. Carol Rivera was helping him organize a charity drive for low-income pet owners. Sarah was reviewing treatment plans for their afternoon appointments. The Hendersons had stopped by with their elderly cat, who needed medication Andre provided at cost. Andre no longer defined his worth by how much he could provide for ungrateful people. He'd learned to choose relationships with people who appreciated his kindness without exploiting it, who supported his goals without undermining his confidence, and who treated him as an equal partner rather than a convenient source of financial support. Beverly Jackson had taught him an expensive but valuable lesson about the difference between being loved and being used. Now Andre chose himself, and that choice had led him to a life filled with authentic relationships and genuine respect. True strength isn't found in enduring disrespect or sacrificing everything for those who take advantage of your generosity. It's found in having the courage to stand up for yourself when others cross the line, even when those people are family. Andre's story reminds us that self-respect is never selfish. It's essential. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like to help others find these important messages. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video with another powerful story of justice and redemption.